Welcome back to The Verdict, our election studios. But Mr. Chukuma, having listened to Mr. Mba, Force Public Relations Officer, yes, highlighting what to expect from the police and coordination for the elections. But, you know, when you hear the Army, the Chief of Army Staff speaking, when you get to hear reports coming from different states about some of those operations, one gets to wonder if really and truly the communication and coordination they talk about is the case, because you would have expected that, well, perhaps the IGP should have been the one perhaps making those comments. Perhaps if they have all of this information, do they hand them over to the police? So do you get the sense that all of that really does happen in spite of it, even if it appears otherwise?
I think the first thing to say is that the reassurances by Frank is good, and what is needed now, because citizens in parts of the country are traumatized, afraid of being intimidated, given what we saw in the last elections in parts of the country. But having said that, we also know there are institutional challenges around coordination, around collaboration, within law enforcement and security agencies in Nigeria. Whereas one is intended, to accept what he said as what is on the ground, but we also know that the military set up their own security situation room. So if the Interagency Security Consultative Forum is indeed the one that all of them are working, there wouldn't have been any need for that. And the kind of messaging we saw or heard from the Chief of Army Staff would have been better passed by the IG as the lead agency, the head of a lead agency going into this election. But I don't think it's something we want to belabor ourselves on, because we are in this country and we know the kind of relationship that these agencies have coming into election. But what I would rather want to emphasize, and going back to what I said earlier, is that security provisioning is a collaborative and coordinated initiative. One is, yes, the security agencies are doing their own, but where we should pay a little more attention is the conduct of political parties and their candidates. Will they behave themselves this time or behave like common criminals? Because there is so much formal security can do in deterring a determined offender. And we know that parties and candidates in these elections know what is at stake, know what they are going to inherit in an environment where accountability in governance is weak.
If I could stretch out a bit, before the presidential elections, in fact, while some of them held some sort of campaign tour, there were some persons who were arrested in some states, political thugs. So when people look to see whether or not those who have been apprehended will face the music, and you don't see that happen even up until today, it just kind of sends you the message that if the thug is connected to whichever maybe superior person or office or party, depending on which state, they may get away with it.
That is actually at the root of lack of trust and confidence in formal security agencies in Nigeria. The clear-up rate of crime, which is the degree to which these agencies actually solve crime problems reported themselves with a view to bringing the perpetrators to justice. In Nigeria, it's less than 10%. I ran Clean Foundation, and we used to run national surveys, and people are simply asked, if you face a criminal incident, if you experience a criminal incident, who would you report to? The reporting rate is less than 10%. People would rather consult informal security agencies, the vigilantes and all of that. It's actually 1 out of every 5 Nigerians that makes use of formal agencies in redressing criminal disputes.
Why is that?
Because of lack of trust, because of lack of confidence, also the low rate of clearance of crime reported to these agencies. So this is what we are living with as a people going into this election. So one would not expect it to change overnight.
What informs this lack of trust?
Because when you report, will they respond on time? When they respond, will they be effective in solving that crime with a view to really getting at the criminal suspects, bringing them to justice? That will increase your confidence level when next you experience crime to report to them. And then you look at the agencies responding to this. What are their own institutional challenges that make it difficult for them to improve their clear operator, right? We know this has been institutional challenges.
But if this is happening within the electoral process, what do you think can be done, especially maybe for INEC to anchor that in terms of people who have committed electoral malpractices, electoral fraud, to be reprimanded? What can be done? Do we go the way of setting up some kind of court?
That could be considered. Because why is it that in electoral adjudication they set up special tribunals to deal with it? In corruption, they set up fast-track court. So in an election environment where we have persistence of violence over time and recommendations stretching back to 2008 report of Justice Uwe's panel asking for a crime commission, electoral crime commission to deal with this, it has not been responded to. You know, and one expected in 2015, when we had a new party taking over a government, that would be done. It has not been done, and the hope is that in the new administration come May 29, that will be one of the priorities that they will deal with within the first 100 days in office.
Who knows when the new cabinet will come?
let me ask
just a minute before you go there. I'm just wondering, Mr. Chuma, for instance, now, you know, we also heard INEC say, well, anyone who perhaps forces an election, maybe returning officer, if they declare you winner under duress, they will not give you the certificate of return because they don't want to reward bad behavior. What kind of impact do you see that particular comment from INEC having on the conduct or behavior of politicians for these elections?
Well, I think it's a welcome development, but it's a little nuanced than that. If they don't issue that returning certificate, would they conduct another election, or would they go through a court process? Because after election, you have to announce a result, and anybody who is aggrieved, the courts are there for the person to seek redress. So when you say you're withholding the returning certificate, then what next?
All right, Ms. Idayat Hassan, I would like to ask you what your take is on the trust quotient between the police and the people. What's your take? I mean, going by what Mr. Chukwuma has said.
I think Mr. Chukwuma has rightly put it. It's a lack of trust and confidence in the system. And you can really understand this because we deal with electoral impunity. So since 1999 to date, at the end of every elections, you find 500 people. Just last week, we were told over 300 people were arrested so far. Come 1 month, 2 months, or the next elections, we don't have evidence that any of these people have actually been charged to court and they are being made to face the music, whatever the penalty should actually be for any of the offenses committed. So it continues to grow, and you see Hydra-headed monster crime. These are very, very huge impunity. In several instances, you see people behead people. Nothing happens. 5 people killed. Nothing happened. An attempt has previously been made by INEC in 2011 with the partnership with the NBA. But despite the number of cases they put together, at the end of the day, they were only able to settle like just 200 of those cases, which were very, very minor cases. Nor did we even put it in the public domain. So this in itself is a kind of disincentive for bad behavior, because you know that whatever you do, you are going to get away with it. And that is one reason that this voter turnout continues to dip. It's the attitude of the political class. There is not just the fact that democracy is failing to deliver to the people, but the attitude of the political class, the do-or-die attitude, the way that politics is everything, and the violence that is actually occasioned. And we are not likely to see anything different tomorrow also. There is no likelihood, because again, it calls to question not just the political class, what they are doing, but exactly how the agencies are collaboratively working together. Now, Frank has given us a good picture of how the police is in the military control room. The military is also present in the police control room. But what is happening in Abuja is entirely different from what is happening on ground. As observers, we get reports, several reports of people conniving. Is either they connive with the security, or the security act alone, or it is the action of the thugs. So these different scenarios, these three different scenarios, dealing with it has become very imperative, because our own end game is to ensure that Nigerians come out to vote and their vote count. And secondly, on the issue of INEC declining to issue certificates to anybody who does any untoward acts, like as witnessed last week. That's like making themselves a court unto themselves. What should be done, what we should actually be clear on, is that will there be a cancellation of such a result? And if there is a cancellation, the aggrieved party can then move on to the court to seek for redress.
I think, in as much as your submissions, some will see it as standing right, do you get that level of comfort, though, when the police PRO, Mr. Frank Mba, did say that for tomorrow we'll have some air wing of the police being deployed to increase security, especially for those kinds of areas that you raise concerns about?
No, I really, Frank has actually given confidence to the system, and to the people listening to him. It infuses confidence. But most times, these hair wink are never seen on ground. Ahead of the elections, we had a lot of story about the dogs that we are going to see, and the ability of these dogs to actually control more than 100 or 200 people. Since the last elections, I've not seen any report that talks about dogs, the police dogs, the K90 dogs being around. So that in itself, it doesn't give me hope. I do not personally believe in that. Then importantly also is that the stakes are quite different for these elections tomorrow. These elections is local. It's completely different from what we actually experienced during the national elections, because the actors are different. The godfathers in these elections are different. So you might even have godfathers at the local government level. Everybody has a stake. And conducting the supplementary elections alongside these elections have also further raised the stakes. Because I give the example of Plateau. Now, Plateau has an age-long crisis in the Jos North. There is a seat that the elections is yet to be concluded in that part. The leading candidate is from a particular part. The most votes that has to be won to declare a winner is on the side of the contentious part in the state. How do you deal with that alongside the governorship elections? The governorship elections, yes, it might not even be the main thing for the people, because you have both of them being Christians. The issue of zoning doesn't necessarily actually come in. Age is not a future in these elections. It's just about who people feel belong to a side and they are more comfortable with. But you have a supplementary elections which has further raised the stakes in these elections. And when you go to each of these states, the context varies. But emphasis is always on Rivers, is on Akwa Ibom, which have historically been problematic in nature. But what is the minimum force to be utilized in such instance is also a question we have refused to answer. It's unfortunate that Frank has left. So if people are stealing ballot boxes, are you going to minimally try to arrest them? Or will you bring the military in, like the cases, the reported cases from last week? So what is the minimum force? The rule of engagement. It goes beyond stationing 2 people without arms or 3 people without arms within the polling unit.
Yes, one more thing. You talked about the fact that this election is a lot more local, even as local as the local government levels. And you remember that not too long ago, the police at state and regional levels have asked for cooperation of traditional rulers and other interests in the communities. How much impact do you see that playing in this election?
The fact is everybody has an interest also. In fact, these elections generally is an elections where we saw the chiefs and the religious leader take a decisive role, a pragmatic one without being prodded in the elections. But that emphasis was more seen as a national one. At the local level elections, everybody has got an interest. You may be surprised to note that even most of these traditional rulers, their kids or wards are contesting in the elections. True. Then, again, don't forget the sophistication of the actors. They are not mostly going to be utilizing talks, local talks in most instances. They may likely, or not, okay, likely, let me use likely without being emphatic, are going to import the people who are going to skew the elections in their favor from other parts of the country. So of what role can a traditional ruler play in such an instance? In Rivers, we've already seen a case where they said the home of a traditional ruler, I don't want to mention his name, but I also do not want to be judgmental of his past, was invaded, people beaten up, and several kinds of human rights infractions occurred at that level.
All right, let me bring it to Mr. Chukwuma before we wrap this up. In terms of some of those states to watch, of which you've looked at already, we've seen Akwa Ibom, Ibesibo, local government area. We understand that INEC office there has been touched. But in terms of the police response, what do you expect?
Police will respond to the extent that they are equipped to respond. Because given that the election is holding in the 36 states, they are already spread far too thin. Yes, they have about 10,000 or more in Akwa Ibom State. So one would expect them to deploy to this site. Frank has informed us that he's yet to be fully briefed. One hopes that when he leaves the studio here, he will be fully briefed so that he can give us a feedback about what the police is doing. And it may not actually be down to the police alone. Other security agencies, especially the military, may come in to intervene because it has involved us now. And that's Akwa Ibom State. We should also not forget other flashpoint states. There is Imo State, where a lot is at stake. Idayat talked about dynasty earlier. Imo State people are trying to prevent the emergence of a dynasty in Imo. And a part of the state, the Owerri zone feel that under this republic they have not had a chance to produce a governor or Kigwe, and although have produced. So going by the theory of politics being local, for the people in Owerri zone is for somebody from that zone to emerge. And you have a situation where, unlike in other states, it will be down to 5 political parties. You have PDP, you have APC, you have ABGA, and then you have
depending on the states.
Depending on the states, yes. But you have five candidates to watch in that election, and then you move up to southwest here. I guess Lagos is where we should pay a little more attention to, given the skirmishes that happened in some parts in last election. A lot of fence building has taken place between affected communities, and we hope that that will go a long way in reducing tension in the state, but it's certainly a state to watch. Adamawa in Northeast is another state where we should watch. The PDP presidential candidate may want to use this opportunity to win back his polling unit and deliver the state to PDP. You also have Sokoto, a traditionally peaceful state, but because of the realignment of forces and cross-carpeting from one party to another, you now have a fairly evenly matched 2 parties that the elections will be down to, which is PDP and APC. And Zamfara, we shouldn't forget that it has had an underlying security challenges for a long time. Many people say Zamfara has been forgotten. Zamfara is almost like Cameroon of Central African Republic, where because of the series of violence and killings that happened here, it no longer makes the headline as it should make. This is certainly a state to watch. Yeah. You can remove Kaduna State, where again you have two evenly matched parties, PDP and APC.
So we just saw Kwara as well.
Precisely. In fact, in every of the 6 geopolitical zones, you have 1 or 2 parties to watch. So our work is cut out for us.
Yeah, so there you go. We'll also keep tabs on some of those states to watch as we describe them. Well, we have to thank you both for coming on. Idayat Hassan is the Director, Center for Democracy and Development. She joined us from our studios in Abuja. And then Innocent Chukwuma, Regional Director for Foundation, joining us from our studios here in Lagos. Thank you both for coming on The Verdict today. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. Okay.